Good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're very well. You're listening to Autistic Voices on UK Health Radio. I'm Evalynne Charmer. I'm a paediatric therapist and I'm the director of EdElf Child Therapy Limited and its sister training company for therapists, the Child Hypnotherapy Institute. And I've recently been diagnosed autistic myself. So I'm very inspired to bring you a diverse and rich range of autistic voices from the community. People who are diagnosed, people who are not diagnosed, people who work alongside and collaborate with autistic families or autistic adults, people who identify as neurodivergent. Please come and join the conversation. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at Evalynne, that's EVALYNNE, at childhypnotherapyinstitute.com or contact me via the show. Thank you for joining me with Autistic Voices on UK Health Radio. My guest of the week this week is Brendan Anderson. He's a SEND and EHCP consultant, and he's here to explain all about that and have a chat with us. So welcome, Brendan.
Good morning, Evalynne. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome to the show. I don't know if you've been listening to any of the shows so far, but we always start with something we're grateful for, because I think it's good to be in a mindset of gratitude. So I'm just going to start with, I'm really grateful for, the internet, I think, and technology. Yeah, because without which we wouldn't be doing this in this way anyway. The show wouldn't be happening and we wouldn't be, well, I certainly wouldn't be able to do my job in the way I do it. I don't know about you.
I'm going to be grateful for my children's school, actually. They're doing a great job. I've got one child with some needs of her own, and they're doing a great job with what they've got. And so I'm very grateful to them.
Well, it's really nice to hear that, you know, because I think schools can get a real battering, can't they? When things aren't going great. But there's, you hardly see anything in the media about celebrating the success and what they actually do achieve and what they do. That's
right. I think social media is certainly a place for people to vent their anger and to say what's going wrong, but there is certainly a lot of good stories out there as well that we need to remember.
Yeah, and you're someone who would know that, because I assume that with your work as a consultant with special educational needs and the education healthcare plans, that you are in contact with a number of schools.
That's right. Yes, and I do get to see the good things that are going on there, certainly.
Oh, okay. So for the benefit of our listeners out there, what is an EHCP? Can you explain?
An EHCP stands for an Education Health Care Plan, which takes in all the needs around education, health and care and puts it into a legally binding document, of which is reviewed every year and should include everything a child needs to access education. So as part of the SEN process, so right at the beginning, if you like, a school will identify a need and then hopefully can meet that need, whatever it is, whether it's a physical disability or dyslexia or an emotional problem. But if they can't, if they need extra support, if they need more resources, more money than beyond their own budget, then they can apply for, and parents can apply for, an education healthcare plan assessment, where all those needs are put together into one document. So everybody who's involved with that child or young person knows what's needed. And an education healthcare plan can be for a child or young person from birth, from 0 all the way up to the age of 25.
Okay, thank you for explaining it so beautifully. I'm just wondering, when you say for for up to the age of 25. Am I right in thinking that, say someone has an education healthcare plan from the age of 6 or 7, which is identified early in primary, does it stay with them until they're 25, and does it apply post-education?
The education healthcare plan is reviewed every year. So if changes are needed to be made to the needs section or the provision section, that can be done. But also it can be ceased. So if the need is no longer as needy, or that child or young person moves out of education, then the EHCP can stop. But as long as a child or young person is in some form of education, and it doesn't need to be education with particular qualifications, it can be any kind of education, then that EHCP can remain in place up to the age of 25, unless they go to university, which I still find surprising, really. But universities have their own system to meet special education needs. Okay,
so it doesn't just fall off, that kind of extra support, if you go to university. It's just done differently, or the process is different.
The process is different,
but the young person should get the same level of support.
They should do.
Yes. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so can you explain what the process is? You said about sort of schools identifying a need. Is that generally what happens, or can parents identify a need for their own child? How does the process get kicked off?
So there's all kinds of issues a child might face in school, from not making progress to refusing to go into school, let's say, or some emotional problems within school, or some physical issues that might stop them from getting in the door. So the school the SENdco, Special Education Needs Coordinator, should work with the class teacher to identify that need and make up a plan. And they can work with other professionals. So you might have an occupational therapist or a physio, or maybe the GP, contact the school and say, there's this issue that we're aware of. Can we come in and support? Can we come in and observe the child? And of course, also the parents can raise issues with the school, and need can be identified that way.
Yes. So I was an assistant head in a special needs school, as you probably are aware of. And as such, I wasn't responsible for education. I was responsible for the residential provision and pastoral type care, safeguarding, that kind of thing. But I did work alongside the SENdco and the head of pastoral and behaviour and those kinds of things. And because it was a special needs school, it was specifically there to meet the needs of children that weren't being met in other schools for a multitude of reasons. Sure. So for me, I was used to having those reviews and things like that. I guess what I want you to explain to people out there who might not have any HCP, or might be thinking about getting one but be put off by the process, why would you recommend it as a helpful thing to have?
Well, firstly, you're right. People are put off by the process of applying for an EHC needs assessment, which is the first stage, because there's a lot of misconception out there, also within schools, of what needs to happen to be able to apply and to successfully apply for an EHC needs assessment. So you'll hear things like £6,000 of school budget needs to be spent on the child before they can apply, that there needs to be a certain number of plan, do, review. They need to be 2, maybe 3 years behind age-related expectation. That's all policy, or even school and LA culture that's come around EHCPs. The law is very, very simple, and the legal bar is very, very low, in that all that needs to be proven is that a child may have SEN, and therefore may need an EHCP, and that is it. That is the only thing you need to prove as a parent if you're interested in writing to the local authority, asking them to assess your child. And that is also extremely easy process, where you can just write a letter and state why you think there's special education needs and why you think an EHCP is needed, and then send all your evidence in with that letter. And that is it. The legal bar is very, very low.
Okay.
And what's going on at the moment is that lots of local authorities are saying no in the first instance. Parents are appealing, and parents are winning those appeals by a rate of over 95%.
Wow.
So, yes, parents, to go back to the original question, parents are put off in applying for an EHC needs assessment, but the likelihood is that you will be successful if you apply. Well, I've been a SENdco, I've worked in special schools, I've worked for the local authority, the SEN department, and had annual reviews and EHC needs assessment applications come into me to deal with. There's two things going on, I think, in that there is a genuine desire for children's needs to be met in mainstream school, and a lot is done, a lot is in place, though resources are stretched to meet need. So there's counsellors, there's therapists, there's multidisciplinary teams, there's advisory teachers all going into schools trying to meet need, to make things easier for children in school. So in the first instances, the LAs and schools will be using these resources to try and meet need without an EHCP. The second thing that's going on, unfortunately, is resources, policy, and the law simply don't meet. There isn't the professionals on the ground to deal with the volume of applications alone that are coming in, let alone the number of annual reviews, the number of tribunals that are out there at the moment going on. They're really, really stretched. So unfortunately, it seems that local authorities are saying no to assessments in the first instance purely because the manpower isn't there.
And the money, I presume.
The money, yes, yeah.
So I wonder what will happen with that then. We'll see how that goes. Because, I mean, I've had the experience of working with a lot of frustrated parents, as I'm sure you do too, who are exhausted by having to, in their words, I've had parents use phrases such as, I've had to absolutely fight.
Yeah, and those certainly are my experiences. I've worked with parents that have had to go to tribunal on every single stage. Yes. So they've appealed the decision not to assess, and then appealed the decision not to give an EHCP after assessment, then appealed the content, and then appealed section I, which is the placement named an EHCP, the school placement, and ended up with a private special needs school.
Yeah.
So in the first instance, the answer was your child doesn't even need an assessment, to your child does need an independent special needs school.
Yes.
So you can understand then the absolute frustration parents have, because they know their child needs a lot of support. And in the first instance, they were told, no, they don't even need an assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a situation that's out there.
We're going to take a break now for some music. And I think our first track today you've chosen is by Rita Ora, I Will Never Let You Down. Can you just say a little bit about why you've chosen?
Yeah, this song was number one when my first child was born. So every time I hear it brings up some beautiful emotions about becoming a parent.
Thank you. Let's have a listen.
Thank you.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
You just said before the break that you got a kind of 360 view of the process because you're a parent of a child with additional needs. You've worked as a SENdco in a school. You've worked in special schools and mainstream. You've also worked for a local authority processing the HCPs. So you've seen it from all angles, haven't you?
Yes. I live down in Plymouth, so the job market is a bit different down here. I've taken a lot of short-term contracts, but out of pure luck, had that holistic experience in SEN, and so very confident in what it's like for all departments and the parents in this process.
Yeah, and if you are helping a family through this process, do you tend to find that families need you or parents need you from beginning to end, or just for one part of it? And you said you do a lot of work around the appeals process.
Yeah, it really depends. Some parents like to do everything with me, as in I will speak to them about every piece of evidence we're putting together, every piece of paperwork we need to submit, every different part of the HCP we're going to change. They like to discuss it, and that can be from when we first apply to when we're appealing over school placement. Some parents just like to give me a brief and tell me and let them know when it's done. It really depends on the needs of the parents as well. Some really do know. Some parents really do know the process. They just want to double check in with me. Some really don't have the time, and that's the biggest problem, really. That's even though the tribunal service is designed for parents to access by themselves, there's a lot of work involved.
And how accessible do you think that is to the majority of families who are looking at this?
No, I don't think it's that accessible, because it's still in the realms of the legal system, though it's supposed to be an accessible form. But you start talking to parents about evidence, witnesses.
It's quite scary.
Judges. You've already got in your mind connotations of quite pressured environments. So as a society in this country, we don't really have another way of getting over these problems and these disputes between local authorities and parents. But it's not as accessible potentially as it could be.
Yeah. And I think that's what puts a lot of people off. And it is quite intimidating, the terminology, I find, the sort of language used around tribunal sounds really, you've got to go to court and stand there and state your case. And a lot of people don't have the confidence to do that. I think
what's helped, COVID has obviously been a tragedy.
Yeah.
But the tribunal service over the past couple of years have moved online. So it's all the equivalent of a Zoom call, if you like. And I think that's made things a lot easier for parents.
Yeah.
Because they can sit at home. You can take breaks when you request, and be in the comfort of your own home. So that's really, really helped.
Will that remain, do you think? Do you think they'll keep with that now?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
it
must be cost effective
for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing as well is I hear a lot, is parents are afraid to say the wrong thing.
Of course.
And I make it really clear to parents, you can't say the wrong thing, because one, you are the best expert in your child. So when I represent at hearings, again, I take that pressure off in terms of I will give all the logical arguments and can answer the questions under that guise, if you like. And that then gives the parents free will, if you like, to sing from the heart. And it's a hearing. And I make that very clear to parents. It's a hearing, a tribunal hearing. You are there to be heard. And to be fair, the system, the panels and the judges are very good at listening. So I could take the pressure off parents with the sort of representation, if you like, and the parents can say it out as it is, and the judges are good at listening.
And they need to hear that, parents. I think it sounds like you do all of the technical side in a way, but also it sounds like probably the most, what appeals to me from what you're saying, Brendan, is that you're a helping hand. You're a hand to hold through it. And and it sounds like you do that in a really empowering way. So you're not disempowering parents. You're actually helping to empower them to be able to be heard and to, you know, have the confidence and the.
Yeah. And again, to take that, you know, I'm not as emotionally involved, but in a way that's a good thing.
It's a really good thing.
I can keep it clear.
But they also, what's lovely about what you're saying though, and what I like about what you've just said is that, but you know the power of that emotion, and that the parent is the best person to advocate for their child. They know them best. They know their needs. They have that strength and that passion, and that needs to be there too. You know that.
Absolutely, yeah.
At a tribunal, people, you know, whoever the decision makers are, they need to hear that. They need to feel that. They need to get a sense of that emotion. So I think it's good that you offer the, you know, the balance.
That's people. Right.
But that enables them to be emotional.
To be the parent. Enables them to be the parent.
Yeah.
Because the judges can give me a hard time sometimes.
Oh, God, I bet, yes.
They things aren't quite right in terms of the argument, or they want things to be clarified, or sometimes I think they just like to pick on the consultant. But, you know, for the parent, it is, in my experience so far, a very good experience.
Okay. All right. So before we go on to the next question, there might be parents out there thinking, this guy sounds just what I need. So how would someone get in touch with you if they wanted to just have a chat with you off the radio?
Yeah, I've got a website with all my details, which is SENdconsultant.co.uk. You can also find me on Twitter my username is @SENdconsultant, and the same for Facebook. I've just gone into Instagram, but probably Twitter and Facebook are the best ones. We've got a Facebook group as well with nearly 4,000 members. That group is fantastic. There's a lot of parents and professionals on that, just giving free advice. And sometimes that's enough for parents to get the confidence or get a little bit of information they want to move forward. Yeah, so it's facebook.com/groups/EHCP support, all one word.
Because sometimes finding these things are probably need you to be a consultant for me to find it in the first place.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Okay, well, let's have a little chat about what happens after the assessment's been done.
So hopefully after the assessment's been done. So to go back to the start. So from the point you apply for an EHC needs assessment, it should take no longer than 16 weeks to complete that assessment. And then an additional 4 weeks, so 20 weeks altogether, then to get the finalised EHCP. So from the point you apply to the point you get the EHCP should be no longer than 20 weeks. Unfortunately, the average is around 60% of meeting that 20-week deadline. And I don't have the figures to tell you what the other 40%, how long they take. But it can take some time, and that can be for a whole host of reasons. But once you get your EHCP finalised, then let's go back a little bit further, a little bit before that. At the end of the 16 weeks, you should get a draft EHCP, and there's your opportunity there to make any changes or ask any questions, and then it's finalised. If you don't have the changes you've asked for at the draft stage, then you can go to appeal, and you can appeal the needs section, the provision sections, and section I, the placement. But once it's in place and you are happy, that EHCP should be reviewed every year, and then further changes could be made if needed, including the school placement if you wanted. But if things suddenly changed, or for some reason you thought things weren't right at EHCP before that annual review, you can ask for an early annual review.
What happens when that child then goes to secondary school?
Yes, there is out there a lot of situations where educational health care plans are applied for at the end of primary school or towards the end of primary school. So things are put in place correctly in secondary school. What I would say to parents who are happy with what's going on in primary school to meet the needs of their child. But in reality, if you think, if the school wasn't quite so good at meeting need, I would need an EHCP. I would argue then maybe you should apply for an EHCP anyway. And that's because to avoid what is really a backlog of year 5 and year 6 EHC needs assessment applications, because there's a lot out there.
Okay.
And yes, it can cause a bit of a problem.
Yeah, is that what happens then? People start applying for them, or schools, SENdco, start applying for them in preparation for secondary, for a child that, So it's probably better to try and start that process earlier rather than...
It is. And for SENdcos, and having been a SENdco, I know that sometimes SENdcos don't like applying for EHCPs because they feel like it might show that they can't meet need with their own resources when they feel like they should.
Yeah.
And that culture kind of really needs to change, because we need to look at it for what it is, and that is, it's an assessment. It's getting to the bottom of the issues that are there for the child, which the SENdco might not see, and might legitimately not see for whatever reason. They've not been occupational therapists, they've not been speech therapists, they've not been physios. And having that EHC needs assessment might just bring up something that was missed. And that's fine, because that's what it's there for. So to not do an EHC needs assessment application because you think it is a reflection of your professional ability, I would say be brave and put that to one side and apply apply early, and avoid this sort of backlog of year 6 applications.
Especially if only 60% are meeting that 16-week draft deadline.
And that's the other point. And then if you were to be refused and apply to Central Tribunal, at the moment, from the application to the hearing, you're looking at nearly 3, maybe even 4 months wait. So you put all that together, you could be waiting over a year. So if you do start at the start of if you do wait to the start of year 6 to apply for an EHC needs assessment, you might not get it until they actually start year 7.
Yeah.
So the earlier the better.
Yeah. The earlier the better. And I guess it's, what do you think children are experiencing and young people during this process, which could take 2 years of their school life?
Well, that's going to be very, very varied. Hopefully they're oblivious to it, and it's for the parents to deal with. But certainly children are on the other end of the spectrum, if you like. Children are out of school because of this. Yeah,
that's very true. That's the kind of thing I end up working with as I now, as you know, work as a therapist with children with special educational needs, and I get a really high, probably 50 to 60% of referrals to me come through schools or the local authorities, social workers, etc. And sometimes the big children's hospitals in London, where paediatric assessments are happening and psychiatric assessments and that kind of thing for children who really cannot be in the school that they're in at the moment for a multitude of reasons linked to their own needs.
Certainly. So if you're in a situation where a child's out of school and a new placement is needed, but the parents having to appeal already by default because of the amount of time you have to wait for an appeal, you're looking at 3 or 4 months out of school, and it's really, really hard on parents and young people.
It's really hard, isn't it? It's but I think I can't stress enough that if there's people like you around, there's probably too few people like you around, because, like you say, you've kind of ended up in this role by default. Really, you said you kind of you've gone through various roles that have given you the experience to be able to do what you do really well.
Yes.
But I don't think there's a lot of consultants like you out there.
Well, I don't think there is. I could probably name you about 20 or so that I've come across, but I know that we're all busy.
Yeah.
There's a couple of very well-known charities, IPSI and SENSOS, which I know are just absolutely full to the brim, trying to help struggling with resources themselves. So,
how is IPSI spelled?
The system. IPSI, IPSEA, and they're probably the main one, and they're fantastic. I mean, that's the other thing. If you go onto their websites as a parent or even a professional to find things out about the EHCP process and how to appeal effectively, it's fantastic. And they offer training. I've completed the level 1, 2, and 3 SEN law training that they provide as well.
Okay. So would you recommend that training?
Oh yeah, certainly.
Is it something parents would benefit
from? Yeah, so it's open to
carers?
Professionals and parents and carers. Parents and carers can get it at a much reduced price as well. So yeah, I would certainly recommend it.
That's good to know. And SENSOS, what's that?
SOS, yeah. I know less about them, to be honest, but I know they're a major charity offering parents help through the SEND and the EHCP process.
Great. So it's something that people can Google and have a look at.
Yeah,
and in terms of, you've already given out, your website and details, how they can contact you. And if you're listening out there, you can also contact Brendan by contacting the show, and we can put you in touch if you want to talk to him directly. How do you conduct, you said you live in Plymouth, and I'm assuming your reach is the whole of the UK. So do you work on Zoom or online yourself, or how do you do that?
I work, again, like I said before, COVID has been terrible, but in terms of for me and other consultants, it's allowed us to work across the country because schools, the Tribunal Service, the LA, have started using Zoom or an equivalent and stayed. So though I'm down in beautiful Plymouth and Devon, I could work across the country, and there's no limit. So I'm bound to just England though, rather than the whole of the UK. The system's slightly different in Scotland and Wales.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
Too familiar with. Yes, that's right. So it's just England for me.
So it gets even more complicated, Brendan. So if somebody's got a child on an education healthcare plan in Wales and they move across to England, it will be a completely different process.
That's a very good question, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how that works. Yes, something to think.
You might be in a situation actually where you live in Scotland, go to school in England as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course.
England and Wales.
Yeah.
If you move local authority within England, I know that local authority may want to reassess the need.
Oh, gosh.
That can
everybody
happen.
Stay put. Stay in your homes.
Yeah, moving local authority can come with
I guess that's good to know, because then if there's parents and carers out there who are going to be moving, and of course there will be lots of them, some people I know who I'm working with are moving simply for a school placement. That's supposed to school placement. That happens a lot, and families moving, to accommodate their child's needs in education, which I think is really common. So, is it worthwhile them checking with the SENdco at the new school, or checking with the local authority? I don't quite know how that would work, because I'd assume.
Yes, you can speak to prospective schools and the LA that you're potentially moving into, but they're not obliged to give a definite answer until you actually.
No, and they probably can't give a definite answer without looking at it all.
Because they have to go with the situation that they have at that time. So, certainly speaking to the schools and getting an idea on whether they can meet need. Is a good thing to do.
I think that's it. And I just wanted to ask you if you have an opinion on it. You said earlier that policy, local authority policy, I'm assuming this is not, I don't know if this is everywhere in England, but there was something about schools, an expectation on schools to have spent £6,000 on a child before applying for an education healthcare plan. And is that something that SENdcos might really struggle with evidencing as well in terms of putting them off applying.
Yeah, I don't know how you can quite evidence that, because you get a certain amount of money per child anyway from the government. So how then do you prove that that has been spent on SEN in particular? In my experience, and I might be wrong, but how you actually to be able to evidence that in terms of SEN would be extremely difficult.
And it's really difficult to measure. It's complex. It's not.
It is complex. And the children, they move the goalposts and suddenly they progress in some areas and sometimes they stop doing something else.
And there's what I call soft outcomes as well, where, you can't measure them against what, it's things that aren't a tick box, but they're really important milestones, So I find that must be something that's really difficult for schools to manage anyway. So what's the last couple of questions then, and we're going to make sure that you get your Ed Sheeran Shape of You song into the interview somewhere, because I know you've requested that. Any particular reason you like that song?
I just like to dance to it.
Oh, fantastic.
He says on radio. So
you've admitted it now. That's fabulous. And we should dance forever. As long as you can dance, I think it's really good to dance.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
So do you have any advice for school staff, for SENdcos, or for any other professionals working within this kind of SEN field?
I think go with your instinct, really. If you think something needs to be in place for a child and maybe you don't quite have the evidence, or you not too sure who are the right people to speak to, find out and say what you think, because sometimes I think what I see out there is people wait to see how things go. They wait until the child is halfway through the school year, or they wait until the Easter, or they wait until Key Stage 2, or they wait until year 6 and then maybe see how the child is doing. What I would say is go with your instinct, and like we said before, you've got nothing to lose from applying for an EHC needs assessment, so go for it.
Yeah, go for it. And I think also it's probably quite poignant to say, and I might get criticised for generalising a bit here, girls who identify as girls from birth, in my experience, are often diagnosed later.
I've read a lot of that recently.
Yeah. So they might
a lot out there about it. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of research, and there's a lot of kind of discussions around, theoretical discussions around why that might be, and we won't get into that right now. So I think also it can be quite difficult for professionals to identify certain additional needs that aren't visible,
That's right. And my experience is only anecdotal, and I don't claim to have done lots of research. But what I've come across is masking.
Yes,
girls with autism, particularly, are good at masking their issues, so it doesn't present. So if you're in a busy classroom with 30 children, you don't present as having a need, because you've successfully masked.
Yes,
and then not until later on in life does that present as
I know. It's interesting, isn't it? And I think we are learning more and more and more all the time. Obviously, we evolve and learn, don't we? But I found it really interesting as well that a lot of boys will be missed as well in terms of being autistic, particularly in ADHD, because they are maybe the perception is that they have behavioural issues.
That's right. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Go with your instinct,
yes.
Especially if you spent, maybe you've been in teaching for in your second or your third or your fourth year, you'll get to know those children with different issues and potentially what's causing it. And sometimes things present in the same way, but caused by different things. So ask around, go with your instincts, talk to parents if you from a teacher's perspective, and then maybe an assessment of need is the right way forward.
And would you say the same advice, tips for parents and carers?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Go with your instinct. Don't take no for an answer. Ask for meetings with the school. Ask for meetings with your GP and referrals. It's sometimes a big, long waiting game, but there's good online support, good communities to sort of vent at and keep going.
I think if I was a parent carer listening to this out there, I might be reassured by the fact that the fight and the battle, to get an EHCP isn't personal.
Yeah,
and it's not about them or their child or that.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes that people need to hear that, because I think it can feel like that. It can.
You're taking the words out of my mouth, because it is about the most personal, important, most emotional thing to you. So of course, when you're told no, or you're told to wait, you're going to take it personally. It's really hard not to.
Yeah,
in fact, it's impossible.
Yeah, and people feel all sorts of things, don't they?
But it's not personal.
Yeah, they feel they're letting their child down if they that. I think it's really, really helpful actually to know that 60% meet that initial assessment in time, and also that there is there's a high ratio of no initial responses to requests for an assessment in the first place, because that really does depersonalize it. So, this is about the system. It's not about me or my child.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Really good to hear that. And I think it's a really important message. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, and
thank you
for being so open and candid about something that is a quagmire. And I'm sure we'll get people with questions. And if you're out there listening and you do have any questions, please let us know, and we'll try our best to answer them for you and put you in touch with the right charities or the right advice and support that you need. So on that, Brendan, is there anything else that you'd like to say today?
No, I think that's it. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today. And if anybody wants to get in contact with me, I'm here to help. So it's SEND Consultant, SEND Consultant.co.uk. And if you look at Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn and type in @SEND Consultant, you'll find me.
Thank you very much for coming on Autistic Voices on